What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Good evening and welcome back, everybody. I am Kory May, one of the co-hosts of Same Difference podcast. To my left, the good Dr. JD Mass is sitting in. Doctor, how are you? It's been a bit.
It has been a bit. And to our listeners, sorry, we've just had a lot going on, both of us at the same time. And so we did miss a week here, but that's all right. We are in our final episode of this season, and it has been a great season. And that is what we're going to discuss today. But before we do, we are going to give our shout outs to VPR for giving us this platform and helping us navigate through this process. They have been great for us. This has been a lot of fun and a great learning experience along the way, both about podcasting itself and about Kory May. And so I'm very appreciative of them, and I'm appreciative of you too, sir. I just want to say that before we get started with this episode.
Well, let me pile on the praise there. So I need to thank specifically Kiana the Goddess and DJ FMI of VPR Radio for giving us the platform, helping us through this entire process. And I've got to give thanks for you and everything that I've learned about you. It's been very cool.
Yes.
So for all of our listeners, remember, when we first started, we didn't know each other.
Right.
And we started talking. There was a case of mistaken identity. JD mistook me for another black man. JD, I thought you'd have known better.
I wish I did, Kory.
Whoa, hey, what's that supposed to mean, man?
It's built into the cake of myself, not of you.
And then we started to talk. And when we began to talk, we found out that we had some similar interests and we both wanted to do a podcast. So that's how Same Difference started. And when we put our heads together, we realized we wanted to meet each other on the radio, on the computer, on the web, wherever you wanted to call it, and learn about each other in real time at the same time that you did.
Very much so. And I want to thank the listeners that have been giving us feedback, that have been telling us what it means to them to learn more, especially some of those that are my complexion that are learning more from both of us about a group of people that they, or even some of their friends that they didn't realize, they didn't know as much about because of the sort of natural segregation process, or just not being around and being involved in Black community as much. And so that's been great to just hear some of the responses, some of the people saying, you guys are really making me think differently or understand people differently. And I mean, that's what this is for. At its core, reason why we're doing this is not just so that we get to know each other, but also so that the world can kind of see a similar and different perspective of growing up the way you and I grew up.
Agreed. And also at the same time, creating a place where we are able to communicate openly And honestly,
Oh, we're supposed to be honest? Oh,
oh Lord,
go ahead. Sorry.
where we
Next
are able
next season.
where we're able to be open and honest and talk about things that aren't easy to talk about. And if I'm able to hear you and not stand in judgment so that you revert to the same old tired talking points and I feel safe enough where I don't have to refer to or revert to the same old talking points, that's when dialogue happens. You listen well, and I get the benefit of that. I listen to you, and you get the benefit of that. You're more inclined to open up and share those real feelings
Yeah,
because we are able to do that, and I'm able to do the same thing. I hope our listeners continue to listen to us and go back and even if they want to re-listen to season one because they can see that gradual transition. It's not leaps of faith, it's steps in trust, right?
sure.
So when I'm hearing about you in St. Louis, I can put myself in that position because of not only the vivid pictures that you've given me of these adventures, but also you've given me an insight into your character. And I can say, oh, I can relate to this experience. I can relate to that experience. This feels real. And
Right.
I can personify myself by what you're doing.
Yeah, and I just think that we interestingly, what I've learned, and I kind of subconsciously knew all the time, but didn't have this mirrored reflection of it, is the understanding of the power dynamics and just being able to hear the reflection. Because it's one thing, right? I grew up as one race inside of a community of another race. You grew up in the same way, in that sense, but the power dynamics are different, right? My natural race has power in this society, right? So even though I grew up as the individual outside of my community, I had a different level of privilege and power, right? Or ability to move without thinking about being white in that world. And yet, being white in the world, I get to remember that I'm white because of the reflection of having grown up around so many black folks, right? And so it's just eye-opening. It doesn't have to be like the thing that drives us, but it's 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 really freeing when you can understand that dynamic. And I'm hoping that more and more folks can feel this way. But I also knowing and learning, and it I didn't have to think about the power dynamics that you went through
Right.
until I thought about it that night, that hey, I would like to learn about Kory, and let's do this in this manner, that we started to talk about, of how do we formulate this podcast. I wanted to know, what is it like for real? Like, I could imagine what it'd be like, but you know, how much of that imagination of mine was actually somewhat real, and how much of it was like, no, I never really thought of it that intently.
Well,
Of
clearly you have learned because your Iowa farm jokes have gotten better
better. Yeah.
as the season has progressed. You remember cultural phrases like put it where the goats can get it? I mean,
Yeah.
it said it smoothly. I mean, I'm having an influence on you.
Hey, there is nothing like country sayings, that's for sure.
uh, we talked about representation and how we we each see each other. You had the opportunity just a second ago to talk about the power and the privilege that you had in terms of being white in a black space and then being able to step out of that black space and still have that power. I've been always looking for representation. How do I find people that look like me in leadership positions? in providing tangible steps toward success. How does excellence look like despite prejudice and bigotry and racism and institutionalized racism? How do we demonstrate that? So these are concrete steps.
Mhm.
How do I find representation that helps me maintain a positive self-image? For those of you who may be waffling on this, it is difficult to have a positive self-image if you never see yourself in any positive roles or if you don't see yourself at all.
Mhm. And that's got to be magnified for you compared to even some of my friends, right? Because at least there's a large enough population here where there's a bigger support group, and we get to, we have a larger community base where you don't even get, you're missing some of that. Not that it doesn't exist at all for you, but on a grander scale, the way that inner cities are set up compared to smaller college cities, there has to be more of a larger area of even representation as far as inside your community. So to not be able to see that and not be able to see it on TV and not be able, like that, I didn't understand the depth of that until we talked, and that's been uh, enlightening for me, eye opening, and something that I'm hoping brings forth a level of eye opening for others as well.
So you bring up a very good point about the visibility of a black middle class.
Hmm.
So you also have around St. Louis, there are within what 50 to 100 miles, there's some historically black colleges and universities.
Yeah, there's
So you're also going to see um, the Divine Nine, the black fraternities and sororities, being a prominent part of the community. You will probably also see the infrastructure of Jack and Jill, a preschool, pre-kindergarten program that's largely black. The influence of the Boys and Girls Club as well.
right,
And those things weren't here. Now, the Boys and Girls Club is not present in Iowa City, if I'm not mistaken. We had the university's facilities that were open to us so that I could go play basketball or lift weights or tennis or racquetball. Those things were available. All right. Public library was available. That's fine. Seeing the very thin layer of black middle class in Iowa City, it was present, comma, but dot dot dot. It
right,
wasn't wide and it wasn't deep.
right. You had to know where it is.
Yes, it wasn't just boom, Saturdays, you know,
Right.
this is where these folks hang out. You know, once or twice a year, there's going to be step shows and
Hmm.
things like that. Those cultural events, especially when I was small, were things that I wasn't aware of. It wasn't until I was in college or I had left. Well, I became more aware of step shows and things in high school. But when I left and went to Morehouse, that's when they became like prominent.
Oh,
And
right.
then coming back, again, the black fraternities and sororities are again thin
Hmm.
or thinly spread out throughout the state. That representation piece is very important. It imagine for a minute that wake up moment when one realizes one is not centered in everything. For example, I was dating a woman who happened to be white, and we were watching Luke Cage on Netflix, and it was largely a black cast. There may have been one white person in it, and she noticed that, and she said, "Oh my gosh, there's no white people." And I said, "It's a love story to black people, and please understand, this is how television looks to me."
Right.
And when there was this moment of absolute mind-blowing, it was like you could see her gaining that, and she said, "Oh my god, that has to be awful." And I said, "It is. That's the reason why I'm watching Luke Cage with such interest, because this is what little Kory would have loved to have had in well, forever.
Right.
And showing a Harlem that is not only rugged, but also beautiful at the same time. And that every episode is named after a Gangstar song. And you had to be in the culture to get that joke or to get that Easter egg, that little reward, that little appetizer that made you feel good. Like, I know that was so affirming to me
Mm.
that I can't begin to share that with folks unless and until they have that eye-opening moment for themselves. Once you have that eye-opening moment of I'm seeing a black television show that's well written and well done, and if I can sit with my feelings and my discomfort, I might have empathy for someone who is different than myself.
It's a powerful thing to be in the world and not recognize what's so common to you is not common to everybody else. And hopefully that the way we're presenting the information, because there are stories, it's not, I get sick of hearing how like we're trying not to teach anybody about certain history because we don't want them to feel bad. Well, one, I won't go into my lecture on all feelings are valid.
Right? We
And
agree.
all feelings can help us, right? If we just suppress them or try to avoid them, but if the way that we're doing this is presenting these stories in a way that can help teach, it really helps empathize,
Right.
and it becomes less threatening to those who don't know. It's not you're a bad person because you didn't know. It's you didn't know, and
Right.
now you get to know, and now you get to hopefully have a level of empathy for others in humanity, period, right?
Right.
And that's largely the goal. It's not to pull us back into shame or anything like that, but to actually help us freely feel okay that this is the way we grew up, and yet there's so much more that we don't know, and a lot of that is purposely structured, and it doesn't mean that in life itself we can't have the freedom to actually start to feel empathy, give credit to others, without it being so much revolving around if I do this, if I tell Kory he's great, does that mean that I'm actually thinking less of myself? If I, and those kind of things. Well, you can make that face, but that's a reality feeling, right? In such a competitive culture where, like I was, this is a kind of sidebar note, but I was looking at a clip of ESPN today, and it's starting to drive me nuts. But they were like, "Well, who's having the better playoff season, Jalen Brunson or Anthony Edwards in this basketball?" And for those of you who don't know, doesn't even matter. The They're having the two best off playoffs right
Right.
now, right?
Absolutely.
Why do we then have to pin who's having the better one? Why can't we just give them flowers? Right. And that's so ingrained in our culture that it goes back to what I was saying. How do I give credit to somebody? How do
Right.
I give appreciation to Black culture? Somebody, a group of people that we have tried to not appreciate for so long because we look at it as a competitive lens instead of just being like, dang, I just appreciate the welcoming, the love that I've received, the perspective that I've been given, the all these different things, and the accomplishments that I've witnessed, and the ability to inspire people that I've witnessed, and things of that nature at a higher level that make me inspired to do as best I can to just be the best version of myself, not from a competitive standpoint, just from a focused on how do I be the best part of my community.
You hit on something that is vital here. Now, we don't all have to get along. We don't all have to be in lockstep with each other. But much like what you said, it's we've got this competitive machine making us downplay the excellence that we see in front of us so that it has to be compared to someone else. I understand that. It's like the GOAT conversations in basketball.
Yeah.
We can't have legitimate GOAT
Yeah.
conversations because so many people played in so many different eras and metrics are so different. No one is exactly the same. No one is exactly the same. And I learned this at a younger age when I was starting to think about I need to appreciate these cats who are playing now because there's going to be a day when they're not going to be playing anymore. We can say that about Michael Jordan. We can say that about Kareem, Magic, um, LeBron. At some point or another, the music's going to stop for that cat. And we're going to be figuring out how do we appreciate him or how do we appreciate each of them in their legacies for who they are and what they are to the
Mhm.
game of basketball. And I think we can pull that out and start looking at that. JD, if you achieve something and I am your friend, I found motivation, I've given you encouragement, you motivate me to do better because of your effort. It doesn't diminish me to say, hey, good job, man.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
I think that's something that we as all cultures could do better about is giving respect because I will say this right out here respect is the currency of the street and it's also respect is the currency of the boardroom, right?
Hmm.
If I'm disrespectful to you, that might make you feel good for a moment, but at some point or another, that's going to come back around on you. And I think in our conversations about race, if we have superiority complexes or inferiority complexes, they affect our ability to give and receive respect.
Yeah. Very well said.
Shucks, you say the kindest things to me.
Only on air.
One of our episodes we talked about the desire to belong, and at the heart of everything it's representation, being seen and heard and felt, being in a place where we are respected, and that whole feeling like, do you remember the sitcom called Cheers?
Do I remember the sitcom?
Oh, I mean, you still got Similac on your breath. I'm just saying.
Came right after Night Court up for me and right before Sanford and Son. So go
Gotcha.
ahead.
Remember in that bar, part of the jingle was that you want to belong. You want to go someplace where everybody knows your name,
Mm-hmm.
and you were accepted, right, left, or indifferent. I think that's what everybody wants, and it's not. I think sometimes um, there are people of both races that are tone deaf to the idea of respect and having a place of belonging. And I think there, in terms of, I want to exclude everybody who isn't just like me. And then on the other side of it, there's folks who are like, I don't understand why you need this, why you need to belong next to me or anything like that. It's like, look, I just want a place to be, right? We see it in housing. I'll just leave it like that.
So I just want to say that one of the things that I didn't know about you, obviously, because we don't know each other until we start this thing, um, is your love for politics, and because of that love, you have a much deeper understanding of it than I do, and my hate for politics left me not wanting to know and understand it to the level in which you do. And so it's been a bit of a peak of curiosity, even though I'm not sure that I'm inspired enough to vote in this election for either one of these two clowns. Excuse my language. I shouldn't say that.
You have a right to your feelings, my friend.
Yes. But I even in the structure itself, I gained a little more understanding of what the approach ideal should look like and what the impact uh, it has, by the way it impacts
Oh,
from learning from you.
thank you. I learned that not everybody understands or has a passion for politics. When you're in it, it becomes your life, and it's
Yeah,
kind of like getting mono. Once you have the virus in your system, it's there.
yeah. I mean, it's an avenue for purpose work, right?
Right.
So it can be, right, like, what I do with Race for What and whatnot, that's purpose work. So there's no leaving it at this point anymore. I can't even imagine myself giving up. It gets frustrating not being able to do it as much as I want due to my current circumstances or whatnot. But to ever think that there would be a time when what I'm working on now isn't to lead me to do more of that. Yeah, I don't. I understand that, and so to hear it from somebody who has that passion because of purpose work, it resonated with me, and I think that's why I learned it. I mean, some people have seen some of my videos, and I'm not saying this to boast, but they have said, "Oh, if he ran for president or whatnot." And I've met people who have run kind of some campaign stuff. And at one point, I did want to be mayor of St. Louis or something to that nature. And I do believe that if I learned politics enough, I would be an inspiring source for some group of people. I don't know who yet, but um, it just hearing you talk about it the way you did, and as the professor, as I like to call you off screen, I did gain some level of piqued interest for the inner workings of it. So
So think about what we're doing here in terms of our conversation. So respect given, a safe place to express yourself. All those things are politics writ large. You're listening to two groups who have differing perspectives. And how do you negotiate a path forward with parties of differing, or with people, groups of people with differing views?
so
And yeah, go
so
ahead, please.
my thing about what you're saying is I'm in agreement with you on the differing. It's
Right,
the fact that, going back to that conversation about competition,
right,
especially in politics, make it different become opposing, and it doesn't have to be. See,
right.
opposing, if for those watching the video, is in a direct line and course with one
Hmm.
another. Yet there's an entire sphere around us in life, in the world, in the universe, and whatever, um, that we could go in different directions, and it doesn't have to be opposing, and we could see. And that's part of the difficulty I have with just the main two-party
Right.
system, as compared to, even though we technically have more, and I still agree that it's a selection, not an election, but I won't go down that road as much. The ideas that differences are opposing one another instead of welcomed, and how do we fit them in, or at least even hear them and acknowledge them, even if we don't go in that direction or disagree or whatever. That
Right.
part has been sort of the turnoff.
We also talked at one point or another. I think this was when we jumped into women's basketball. Iowa's Caitlin Clark, LSU, and Angel Reese, as well as South Carolina and Dawn Staley. The dynamics of that and the fan bases that were charged up. And remember, we talked about the idea that I project all the virtues on the players I support and the teams that I support, and I project all the vices and throw my vitriol at the opposing team. They can't possibly be that good. They
Right.
stink. Rah, 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 rah,
They
rah.
can't even be good people anymore at
Oh,
this
yeah.
point. Like, yeah.
And when we do that, we've demonized. And a lot of times we're demonizing along racial lines. As much as I want to give the benefit of the doubt, I think it's baked into the machine.
Without a doubt.
And not only is it baked into the machine is amplifying the biases of the writers. And in order to be accepted, if you are black, and in order to be accepted by many whites, one would have to be like Jason Whitlock, who manages to parrot old racial tropes and almost all Donald Trump's talking points. And he's accepted by many whites, while black people are like, dude, have you stop.
And it doesn't have to even be that extreme, although that is absolutely the exact sort of example of it from that group of people. But even, I'm going to point my finger at you for a second. You're well spoken, right?
Are you going to hit
So
me with the articulate line?
yeah, I am. Right. And so whatever our cultural definitions are, our ability to only accept those who have assimilated into our form of our cultural norms instead of accepting the differences. That's why I love, and I think we talked about this, one of the greatest interviews I've ever seen is when Conan O'Brien, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes,
screw
yes.
it up all the time. Conan O'Brien interviews Marshawn Lynch.
Oh, yes.
Marshawn Lynch refuses to talk any way other than how he would talk to his neighbors and friends on the streets. And Conan O'Brien is, Ivy League, nerdy look, nasally talk, whatever, all of these things. And it's like super white guy meets super black guy. And they have these conversations that are so accepting of one another, so loving, and yet they are damn near talking two different languages
Right.
to each other because the lingos are so different.
Right.
And that should be, because that's not saying you have to assimilate to my culture to be accepted. That's saying I'm accepting you where you're at, and I'm actually listening to what you're saying and not judging how you're saying it.
Right.
And the message becomes more important, and it's just the greatest thing example of, they got us beat. I'm sorry, and I'll give that, and I shouldn't even say it in that sentence because that's
Why are you competing, JD?
exactly. But they I gotta just give them their flowers on their level of communication.
I'll go back even further, to, if you want to dig around on YouTube, William F. Buckley, conservative, and James Baldwin, liberal, having dialogue, legitimate dialogue. And the eloquence of their arguments back and forth. Buckley, at first, Buckley is kind of like, oh, and Baldwin is right there with him. And you see them going back and forth, and there's this respect that you see. Respect was given to Buckley, but Buckley soon says, you know what? I respect James Baldwin because he is speaking my language. I'm speaking his language, and we can go back and forth and have a dialogue. I appreciated watching that, and I love that clip.
Yeah. It's one of those Howard Cosell, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali kind of pieces.
And there was no assertion of power over each other.
Right.
At some point, this is conversation among equals. And people who just who believed, hey, I have met somebody on my level. I'm going to talk. We're going to talk. They're going to talk. And it works. I had no idea. This is the worst segue ever. I had no idea you had such an interesting college career.
Well, I'm glad you segued because I've been wanting to, and I couldn't find a way to. So let's just rip it off and go that direction.
Dog,
Yeah,
I had no idea.
yeah. Well, wait till you hear about my other stories. Uh, so yeah, my college experience was definitely an explorative one into a world of that wasn't just on campus. Let's leave,
Right.
and I'm glad I was protected enough to have experienced it, explored it, and be on this side of some bars at times, and to be able to share it and explain it and whatnot.
I was mesmerized by those stories. And for those of you who haven't heard, go back. You got homework. You got homework. JD's college career is amazing. He's an excellent storyteller. So when he tells this to you, there is the weight of the experience and the truth of the experience behind that. There is veritas and gravitas. There you go. I went to those influential words that you were
Yes,
talking
the
about.
Kory May words of the podcast.
I am mesmerized because so many of the things that we talked about were encapsulated in those stories. Your ability to move around society with little to no, little or to no scrutiny. You could go places. In some respects, you were invisible. In other respects, you were very visible. The idea that you had access to a network that was making sure that you weren't going to get into the deep end of trouble. That's a great master class in everything that we talk about.
Yes. And for me, like moving forward with my stories, now that we're starting to talk about the Nelly stuff in my Nelly years, I was looking at an episode of VPR a few weeks ago, and they talked about and I think they put a clip up of it, and it went on social media, and there was some responses, but it had to do with the level of intersection in the hip hop world and music world and the gangbanging world of Los Angeles, especially. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one, you got to understand gangbanging is so prominent. It's literally just your neighborhood. Right. And we can go into all of the COINTELPRO manipulation and got it to where it is today and whatnot. But it's also just your network of friends, and now we've glorified it into this, Bloods and Crips and Pyru and Rolling 60s and all these different things. But when you're out there, that is the culture. And so there is a level of you're going to need protection from us, or we're going to take advantage of you in that culture of the hip hop world. And so you naturally kind of hire and bring on somebody in that world to protect you from the rest of that world. And it's so intertwined at the highest level of promoters and executives that have relationships with gangbangers and gangsters out there, uh, that they know the movements of the industry so much, right? They're ingrained in it. And so at some point, you're not from there and you go, man, I ain't going there and checking in with no rappers. I mean, with no gangsters and this, that. And I'm not checking in. And you naturally will. It'll happen so naturally that you won't even understand you're checking in. You will find yourself surrounded at a point because you're coming into their neighborhoods, into their culture, into their right. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just happens. And
Right.
so if you accept it differently, then it's just part of the culture of the I mean, like I had the straightest white guys, and I'll get into this more, that were living on the beach because they were such successful um agents, and touring agents and whatnot, and telling me, "Hey, we hear that it's going to be, the Jackers are going to be out this award show time period. You might want to just let Nelly know he needs to lay low and this, that, and the other." And I was like, "How the hell do you know?" Right? Like, where are you getting your intel from? And over the course of time, which I'll share in future episodes, I learned how they knew and why they knew. I say that to say, tying back to my level of interacting in the street of the business that was at hand during the 80s and 90s, especially. I knew how to recognize certain attributes of people as they approach me, and I got my favorite kind of story to tell, and partly it is just because I was able to stand up for myself in a way that would have frightened and did frighten others. um it just gave me that sort of groundedness, and I can tell when you're just trying to scare me versus when you're actually threatening me.
Right.
And so I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but that is maybe to just tease the folks about what's to come. But yeah, my journey allowed me to do a lot, and I really look forward to this next season coming up and really exploring some of what my adulthood was like with you. Also, trying not to do too much, just like gossip stories
Right.
and
Right.
venting about people I didn't like, even though that'll get us more likes and in the clips and everything.
There's also, again, the underlying stories of both what you saw in St. Louis and in LA and what I saw in Washington. And it's, again, competition. The system is setting up competition.
Yeah,
Now, I
they
remember,
call it race. Go ahead.
yeah, yes, perfect, perfect. I remember I was visiting Washington, D.C. in the 80s during Iran Contra. So, for those of you who don't know what that was, the United States was involved in a deal to sell drugs in the United States to raise money to arm the Contras in Nicaragua, selling drugs from Iran, if I'm not mistaken, or buying arms
Hmm.
from Iran to fund this war in Latin America.
No, I thought they were buying drugs from Latin America to fund the war in Iran. That was not the
I thought it was the other way
okay.
around.
Well,
I'm a
whatever.
little fuzzy, but we can dip into that. The arms and guns were on U.S. streets to fund this war
Oh yeah, the
in
arms.
Latin America. So
Right.
it was the fact that we as a country were ready to capitalize on human frailty in some of our strongest countries, I mean, some of our strongest communities, and
Hmm.
destabilize them in the name of freedom. Wherever crack went, devastation follows. The whole destabilization of the black nuclear family happens, and guns
Hmm.
increase, property values drop, and then you just see a rampant destruction of black culture.
And while this is happening, white folks are moving away, further away from it, and so they're become and taking the resources with them, And so there becomes this scarcity, which is what drives competition, right? Creating scarcity. It's our economic principles are based on their scarcity of resources on the
Right.
planet, when the truth is there's an abundance. And so this whole mission to create scarcity whenever you want to harm somebody, it's been look at any time throughout history when you want to harm. And what that does is it almost dries out the brush. So when you light the fire, you don't have to light the next bush and the next bush. You've dried out the brush. It becomes the brush fire. It spreads on its own. And now, using media, you can just sit back and go, look at how these people behave.
Right. You just described the political term and the trade term of an embargo. So we have a pipeline. You don't do what we want, we turn off the spigot. And it works on foreign soil, it works on domestic soil, it works as a mindset. If you do that sort of thing in a one-to-one relationship, you create a power imbalance that will make someone do almost anything to get that spigot turned back on.
And almost form an imbalance in their mind so that the few that come out of that want more, and you start this level of desire for greed within it,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And so which in politics you can manipulate that. And so as we're getting closer to the end, I don't want to just leave on these sort of sad notes of all of
Right.
this, even though there's a lot of this, and hopefully we're opening up eyes, not making people feel bad. But it's really that simple, that we can just change our approach to one that is more loving and caring, and understanding that the world has an abundance of the resources that we need, that we can start to really see a less of a need for feeling the desperation that so many of us feel at this point, to whether it's the desperation to keep up with the competition, whether it's the desperation that is real and the desire to just be able to feed and house our families, that somehow we can lessen the competition approach and more open up the collaboration and loving cooperation and serving and whatnot approach to it too.
Exactly. Um, Let me amplify that point just a little bit more. The young folks call it hating. You can be a hater, and I'm going to make this point: the hate you give is based on the comparisons you make. If somebody else is driving a white BMW SUV and you're not, and you compare themselves, you compare yourself to them, all of a sudden, guess what? That person isn't worth a plug nickel.
Mm.
Look at them. They got all this stuff that I don't have. And it's based on that comparison that you've made with yourself. It's not, I mean, the comparison you've made with that other person. It's not the comparison that you make for yourself to say, hey, wait a second, I can do better. I'm self aware enough, I can do better. This is where I am. I want more. And listeners, hate is not a hating that haterade jealousy kind of thing is not related to any one race or a gender or a
Mhm.
mindset. It can happen and be overwhelming to anyone, especially when you compare yourself to others.
Yes, sir. So, Kory, what can we look forward from you uh, in episodes to come? What do you want?
Next season, I would look at more stories and adventures, wisdom and learning. It's still an interesting place to be Black in America, and especially a Black male over 55. Heck, I just turned 57 4 days ago. That was May 4th. So I have the best of both worlds. I have May the 4th be with you and Cinco de Mayo. That's one great weekend. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's one great weekend, 2 fantastic days. But it's more observations, more stories, more willingness to recognize what I don't know. And there's a lot that I don't know.
Right.
So, what can we expect from you, good doctor?
More stories of a world of influence from behind the scenes. Like I said, I going to spend this off season, so to speak, really thinking about how I present the information so that I don't become too gossipy, but also don't hide some teaching experiences. And the world of learning community building at a whole nother level following my Nelly years. So there'll be great stories to share in that regard as well. And yeah, I look forward to us really promoting this first season. So I'm encouraging all of our listeners to also, share your experiences. Hopefully, we can look into even sponsors and getting this, um, picked up in a greater level. And learning a greater production for this so that we continue to be true to who we are, the storytelling and getting to know each other process. That's sort of the main thing, and keeping the main thing, but also the level of influence that we potentially can have, and how do we manage that differently. Look, there'll be more social media. We've been working, poor Essie, and to her fingers are getting numb over there with the editing of these and just putting it out and promote and helping us. And now we're gonna keep those fingers numb and showing some snippets. And yeah, I just this has been a great learning experience. I look
Oh, yeah.
forward to seeing what our sophomore year looks like. And you are Wimbanyama and I'm
Are you Chet Holmgren?
Chet Holmgren.
What's also interesting, fellow listeners, is if everything aligns, I may meet JD
Yeah,
in St. Louis. And if that happens, rest assured there will be video and we'll probably do some live work together to send into our podcast as well.
sure.
And maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to pull it off so that I can bring JD up here up
Oh
north
yeah, I'm
in Iowa.
coming. I am coming. I got hey, your colors already match my colors, so
Right. I'm good with that. I'm
yeah.
very good with that.
They don't have to know U City doesn't mean University City in the way that they think it does.
I'll get you in some black and gold with Iowa on it as well.
Yes, sir.
So, Doctor, it's been one heck of a first season.
Yes.
I am grateful for you. I am grateful for everything that you stand for and for everything that you want to promote. I am grateful for the book and I am grateful for all the hard work you've put into this.
Well, thank you. And I reflect that gratitude for you helping share this platform with me. Just the differences that we've allowed to be, appreciated amongst us, just it's been a really great ride. And thank you to everybody involved. Thank you to all of our listeners. And we look forward to season 2. I'm going to say sometime around Labor Day, maybe sometime in August, but we will be sure to promote it and let everybody know. So keep following, keep letting us know you're out there. Shoot us a message for how you thought about season 1. And yeah, let's keep doing what you're doing. And, in the words of Bernie Mac, don't be afraid of the word mother. All right.
They can hear from us. You can write to us at Same Difference Podcast.
No, broadcast.
Same Difference. Geez.
I'll take
Same
it from
Difference. Why don't you do it?
here. Same difference broadcast at gmail.com is where you can email us. And same difference life is where you can find all of the links to the social media to follow us, find all of our episodes. And we look forward to building that out as well to be, something greater in the future.
I'm Kory May.
And I'm JD Mass. Thank you for listening and being a part of this.
See you next season.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.